This is the part they never wanted you to hear, because the moment you understand it, your body stops behaving like a predictable machine and starts acting like an intelligent, self-repairing organism again. Kumbhaka, the deliberate suspension of breath, was never a relaxation technique, never a wellness trend, and never meant for casual practice. It was classified as dangerous, forbidden, even destabilizing by ancient yogic orders, because it interfered directly with the most primitive survival codes written into human biology. You were taught that holding your breath is harmful, that oxygen is always good, that more air means more life, but that story is incomplete. And incomplete stories are the most effective form of control. I'm telling you now, directly, that the deepest repair mechanisms in your body do not activate when oxygen is abundant, comfort is high, and breathing is easy. They activate when oxygen drops, carbon dioxide rises, and your nervous system is forced into a rare state of biological truth. Ancient practitioners knew this, guarded it, and wrapped it in ritual not to mystify it, but to protect people from misusing it. Today, fragments of the same mechanism have been awarded Nobel Prizes under sterile names like oxygen-sensing pathways and hypoxia-inducible factors. Stripped of context, stripped of practice, stripped of power. What you're about to learn was never lost, only buried under safer narratives. Kumbhaka is dangerous, not because it harms you, but because it reveals how much of your degeneration is optional. When you suspend the breath, you suspend the automatic loop of fear-driven respiration that keeps your nervous system locked in survival. You step outside the rhythm imposed by stress, trauma, and modern life, and for a brief window, your cells receive a signal they almost never hear anymore. Repair now, or fail. This is why the technique was restricted. This is why it was whispered, not taught openly. Because once you realize that something as simple as breath retention can flip switches tied to longevity, regeneration, and genetic stability, the illusion of helplessness collapses. You are not broken. You are suppressed. And the breath is the key they told you not to touch. You are living inside a body that is constantly improvising damage control, and you've been conditioned to believe this is normal. Your breathing is shallow, fragmented, unconscious, driven by anxiety you no longer even register as anxiety. Every rapid inhale you take tells your nervous system that danger is near, that resources are scarce, that survival is more important than repair. Over time, that message becomes permanent. Inflammation stays switched on. D and A. Repair pathways stay silent. Cells replicate with errors, mitochondria leak energy, and the brain remains trapped in high-frequency noise that feels like thought but functions like static. You feel tired but wired, focused but foggy, alive but brittle. This is not aging. This is a body stuck in emergency mode. Modern life has trained you to breathe as if you are being chased, even while sitting still. And biology is brutally literal. It does not care about your intentions, only your signals. When respiration never pauses, when carbon dioxide never rises, when oxygen is always artificially abundant, the body never receives permission to slow down and rebuild. Autophagy, the internal recycling system that clears damaged proteins and corrupted cellular components, becomes inefficient. Telomeres fray faster. Gene expression tilts toward inflammation and away from regeneration. You are told this is inevitable, that decline is natural, that stress is just part of being human. That lie is convenient, because if degeneration is unavoidable, then no one is responsible. But if degeneration is a breathing pattern, then everything changes. The real danger is not Kumbhaka. The real danger is never interrupting the respiratory loop that keeps your nervous system addicted to threat. As long as you breathe without pause, your body remains obedient, predictable, manageable. It never enters the rare metabolic state where deep repair becomes non-negotiable. You are not lacking supplements, motivation, or discipline. You are lacking a signal strong enough to override survival mode. And until that signal appears, your biology will continue to choose speed over precision, reaction over restoration, and short-term survival over long-term integrity. This is the stake. This is what remains broken if nothing interrupts the breath. Here is the mechanism they explain in fragments, never as a whole, because the whole picture is unsettling. When you suspend the breath through kumbaka, you intentionally create a controlled hypoxic state, a temporary lack of oxygen paired with a rise in carbon dioxide. To the conscious mind, this feels like danger. To the cell, it feels like a verdict. Oxygen-sensing proteins immediately activate, the same molecular switches that modern science stumbled upon and rewarded with Nobel Prizes decades later. These sensors don't panic. They assess. And when oxygen drops without injury, they assume something far more serious than stress is happening. They assume adaptation or extinction. This is where repair begins. Hypoxia-inducible factors move into the nucleus of the cell and start rewriting instructions, suppressing wasteful processes, and activating survival programs that modern comfort has made dormant. Autophagy accelerates, scavenging damaged proteins and dysfunctional mitochondria, like a cleanup crew finally given permission to work at full speed. The vagus nerve, relieved from constant respiratory motion, shifts dominance away from fight or flight and toward deep parasympathetic control, slowing heart rate while increasing internal coherence. Carbon dioxide, demonized for decades, becomes the hidden ally, widening blood vessels, improving oxygen delivery efficiency, and stabilizing neuronal firing. At the genetic level, breath retention creates a brief epigenetic shock, a signal strong enough to override habitual expression patterns and force cells to prioritize repair over growth. Think of it like pulling the emergency brake on a runaway system, not to crash it, but to realign it. This is not mystical. It is ruthless biology. Cells do not regenerate because you ask them nicely. They regenerate when the environment demands precision. Kumbhaka creates that demand. In that suspended moment, when the breath is locked and the mind wants to escape, the body stops lying to itself. Every unnecessary process is silenced. Every repair pathway that can activate does. This is why casual breathwork never reaches this depth. This is why constant breathing keeps you safe but stagnant. Kumbhaka is the metabolic interrogation your cells have been waiting for. The moment where biology is forced to answer a single question. Are you worth repairing? This is where ancient ritual and modern laboratory data collide, and the collision is not comfortable. Kumbhaka was never practiced in isolation. It was embedded in lineages that understood the psychological and biological consequences of suspending breath. Yogic texts warned that improper retention could destabilize the mind, not because it was symbolic, but because it forcibly shifts brain chemistry and neural rhythm. What they described in mythic language, modern neuroscience now measures as theta-dominant brain states, coherence between cortical and subcortical regions, and abrupt reductions in default mode noise. The ancients did not have microscopes, but they had pattern recognition refined over centuries. They saw that breath suspension triggered periods of heightened clarity, physical resilience, and unusually slow aging in practitioners who survived the discipline. That knowledge was guarded, transmitted orally, diluted with metaphor, and restricted to initiates because the mechanism was too powerful to be democratized safely. Today, science approaches the same territory from the opposite direction, isolating variables, naming pathways, awarding discoveries, while avoiding the uncomfortable implication that a human can deliberately induce these states without technology or drugs. I stand at this intersection intentionally because separating the two narratives weakens both. The ritual without science becomes superstition. The science without practice becomes sterile trivia. Kumbhaka is the missing bridge. It explains why ascetics could sit motionless for hours with slowed metabolism, why oxygen deprivation under controlled conditions enhances neuroplasticity, and why modern experiments on intermittent hypoxia show improvements in mitochondrial efficiency and stress resistance. The reason this convergence feels unsettling is because it collapses a hierarchy. It suggests that ancient bodies, without equipment, accessed states that modern humans require machines to simulate. That realization threatens authority. So the story is fragmented, scattered across yoga manuals, neuroscience papers, and medical footnotes, never assembled into a single actionable protocol. When you connect them, the pattern is undeniable. Breath retention is not symbolic control. It is direct access to a biological override system built into you long before language existed. And once you see that, it becomes impossible to unsee. Now we move from understanding to execution. And this is where discipline replaces curiosity. Kumbhaka is not performed casually, and the smallest deviation changes the outcome completely. You begin seated, spine upright but not rigid, chest open without strain, jaw relaxed, tongue resting lightly against the upper palate to complete a neural circuit. The ancients understood intuitively. Breathing is nasal only, slow and silent, because the nose regulates pressure, temperature, and nitric signaling that the mouth cannot. You inhale steadily, not deeply, filling the lungs to a controlled capacity that leaves room for internal adjustment. Then you seal the breath. No air escapes. No air enters. This is not forceful locking. It is containment. The throat remains soft, the diaphragm suspended, the abdomen gently engaged, as if holding something valuable, rather than resisting something dangerous. The eyes are closed, not to relax, but to withdraw sensory interference. Attention is placed inward, specifically on the sensation of pressure rising, not the urge to breathe. This distinction matters. The moment you fight the sensation, the nervous system reverts to panic. Instead, you observe it like a scientist observing a reaction in real time. Retention time is not measured by the clock, but by control. The moment tremor, air hunger spikes, or mental fragmentation appears, you release slowly through the nose, extending the exhale longer than the inhale to signal safety to the vagus nerve. One round is enough to trigger the mechanism. More is not better. Precision is everything. Between rounds, breathing returns to slow nasal rhythm until baseline calm is restored. This protocol is practiced empty stomach, low stimulation, never during acute stress, illness, or competition. The danger of Kumbhaka lies only in ego and excess. The power lies in restraint. Done correctly, the body enters hypoxic alert without crossing into threat. Done incorrectly, it becomes another stressor. This is why it was taught privately, corrected constantly, and never rushed. You are not proving endurance. You are issuing a command. The transformation follows a timeline, whether you believe in it or not, because biology responds to signals, not expectations. In the first sessions, the change is neurological. Within minutes, heart rate variability increases, cortical noise drops, and the mind enters an unfamiliar quiet that feels unsettling precisely because it is rare. Sleep deepens that night, not longer, but heavier, as if the brain finally receives permission to power down fully. Within days, carbon dioxide tolerance improves, breathing at rest slows automatically, and baseline anxiety loses its constant edge. This is the nervous system recalibrating. Over the following weeks, the effects move inward. Inflammatory markers trend downward. Mitochondrial efficiency improves, meaning more energy is produced with less oxygen waste. Autophagy becomes measurable, not as a concept, but as a reduction in systemic fatigue and faster recovery from physical and cognitive stress. Skin tone, temperature regulation, and mental clarity shift subtly but consistently. Months in, the deeper mechanisms dominate. Gene expression patterns associated with stress resistance and cellular maintenance increase, while those tied to chronic inflammation and degeneration decrease. Telomere attrition slows. Biological age markers decouple from chronological time. This is not reversal in the cinematic sense. It is stabilization, which is far rarer and more valuable. The body stops leaking integrity. What matters is not intensity, but continuity. One precise kumbaka practiced consistently outperforms sporadic extremes. The moment you cross this threshold, your system no longer returns to its previous baseline. It adapts upward. This is why people describe a point of no return, not because they become dependent, but because the body refuses to go back to inefficient breathing once it has experienced coherence. This is the timeline they never show you in headlines because it doesn't sell urgency. It builds inevitability. This is where the protocol stops being information and becomes a test. Kumbhaka does not reward passive interest. It exposes it. The moment you suspend the breath, excuses vanish, distractions fall away, and you are left alone with your own nervous system. That is why most people will never practice this consistently. Not because it is physically difficult, but because it removes the buffer between stimulus and self-control. You now know that degeneration is not just time passing. It is a signal repeated daily through unconscious breathing. And knowing that creates responsibility. You can no longer blame genetics, environment, or fate without ignoring evidence your own body will confirm within weeks. This technique will not save you if you treat it like a trend, and it will not forgive arrogance. It demands restraint, patience, and precision. The challenge is simple, but uncompromising. Practice controlled breath suspension regularly enough that your biology recognizes you as an environment worth maintaining. Each session is a declaration that survival mode is no longer the default. That repair is not optional. That chaos does not get to set the rhythm. Very few people cross this line because it means relinquishing the identity of someone who is merely coping. Once you do, the body responds with loyalty that feels almost conspiratorial, as if systems long dormant were waiting for permission. This is not about mastery over breath. It is about restoring command over the signals that decide whether your DNA stabilizes or frays. You have the protocol. The window is open. What happens next is no longer hidden. It is chosen.